You don't want to try and create great software. You want good enough software. That's the goal. If that sentence made you uncomfortable, you're thinking like a junior, and that mindset is exactly what's holding you back. Look, I get it. You've been taught that great developers write clean code and follow best practices and build things the right way. And now you're stuck obsessing over code quality, maybe grinding leak code, and wondering why you're not getting promoted or why you can't even find your first role. Today, I'm breaking down the mindset shifts that separate junior developers from senior. These tips aren't about what framework you're using or what programming language you're using. This is about how to actually stop thinking like a junior developer. So with that, let's get into it, starting with number one, which is think in systems, not just code. Now, one of the things that I teach everybody, no matter if you're a beginner or whether you're a senior, the biggest thing you can do is think in systems, not just the code that you're writing. Now, when you're writing code, you're focused on the syntax and exactly that business logic or maybe that functionality of what you're typing. But you're not thinking about the entire system as a whole. And when you think of the entire system as a whole, that's when you can actually create the real product that you're trying to build. And this is literally one of the biggest things that separates junior developers from mid to senior is knowing how to make that next step that's going to build the product that the entire company wants, that's going to solve a business problem and not just writing code for the fun of writing code. And you'll read in all the textbooks and watch the videos and the tutorials that talk about how to write beautiful code. Code that scales, code that everyone can read and maintain. And those are really important. Don't get me wrong. You want to write really nice code when you're given the opportunity to write that code. But one of the biggest things is understanding like how that fits into the entire diagram of building the product. When you can start fully understanding why your code fits into the entire diagram of the software that you're building, everything starts making a lot more sense. And you'll start going after what makes sense for the system that you're building and not just what's fun or clean for your business logic. Because if it doesn't match what you're trying to build, it doesn't really mean anything. And another thing that I notice with junior developers and a lot of their thinking is not understanding or processing how what they code or what they change will have a downstream effect on the rest of the application. So for example, using abstraction in maybe parts of the application where, you might abstract this one functionality, but another function might rely on that abstraction now, and now you're changing that. Or you're wanting to add a new data model into the application to allow you to do your specific task easier. But that requires a change in the database or maybe the cloud infrastructure, something where there's going to be a major downstream effect of what's getting added. And when you start thinking in systems and downstream effects and how your business logic actually integrates with the entire problem that you're trying to solve, that allows you to really create the software that is needed versus trying to I don't want to use the word flex, but trying to write code that doesn't match the requirements of the software. Now, number two is good enough software is the final goal. And one of the best analogies that I've used to kind of describe this problem is the goalpost and what we're trying to build is always moving. What we're trying to get to, the goal is always moving because there's always bugs we want to debug, there's always features we want to add, and there's always change in requirements that the person using the software wants to add or change, or just the entire landscape changes. There's not too many pieces of software that were built 10, 15, 20 years ago that no one has to maintain, no features have been added to, and no bugs have been fixed. And it's just running every single day, 24/7, and everything is golden. That doesn't exist. When you're building software, chasing for perfection isn't always what we want to do. And again, that's because the perfection of what is perfect never actually becomes a thing. It always needs something else. And a great thought process to this is perfection only matches your understanding of the software. So if the software changes, you might have wrote perfect code for the old version. That doesn't necessarily mean you're adding maintainability, scalability to the future version. So what you always want to make sure you get to is good enough software because that's the final goal. That is the goalpost. That is what we're all striving to do. Also, when you're trying to build good enough software, you always get this edge or this urge to always try and refactor existing code. And that's because you're looking at the code that maybe somebody else wrote. Maybe it was you a couple of days ago, weeks, months, years, and you're seeing that there is some areas that can be improved, right? Maybe you can add in some encapsulation here, or maybe you can add some enumerations here, or abstraction. There's areas where the code can be improved. And a lot of people want to spend their time refactoring code, but does the refactor actually move the needle of the business? Does it create business impact outside of the fact that this might remove a little bit of tech debt now? And it might not even be tech debt, right? Because better code is a good solution, but it's not always the right solution at all times. It's all about high priorities. So if the number one priority you have is creating a feature, creating something that creates more money, that creates less bugs, that's going to increase the user experience, that is high priority. Something that may increase performance slightly, something that's not even, recognizable by a human, something that, changing a brief color of an item that no one has done analytics on to see if that's going to actually, create positive impact. Those kind of refactors end up just taking time. And a lot of developers aren't cheap for companies. So that is actually just considered like a waste of time, money, and direction. And another thing to consider here is that companies don't necessarily pay developers to write code. Coding is part of the job, but they pay you to solve business problems with technology. And that's a big misconception in the world of software development. And a lot of that misconception comes from believe code is what you do. You take a lot of pride and a lot of extra effort in writing the best code you possibly can. But software is a technical skill. Some people call it a craft or maybe even a discipline on how you can create working products for the business that creates positive impact. And spending extra time on code because you believe it's more clean or more perfect, but it doesn't actually necessarily tie back to the business impact. Maybe it doesn't tie back to performance or maintainability or scalability or even readability. Then it's considered just a lost cause or a loss of revenue and a loss of money because you spent more time doing that, which actually dropped the entire team's velocity versus increasing the team's velocity by creating good enough software. So always have that in the back of your head because shipping software that people can actually use and that you can iterate on is better than perfect code that is an opinion that is not yet shipped. Now, the third thing that's keeping you stuck as a junior engineer is thinking that the database is not hard to change or thinking of the database second to the code instead of the more important one. The database is by far the hardest piece of a software product to have to change. A lot of people will kind of just start with the most simple data models possible and be able to scale it with migrations or scale the database with migrations afterwards. And that is a way that it can happen. You can, in fact, scale a database with migrations and be able to alternate it and then use the code to fill in the spots that you're changing with migrations. But one thing that I have learned in my 10, 11 years as being a back-end software engineer is that databases are significantly harder to change in an existing application than the code. We are always changing code. We are always adding new features, maybe fixing bugs, maybe trying to align it better with the database, setting up data models, all of that kind of stuff. But database tables are really hard to change because especially if it's an existing application, there's going to be so many tables of data, and that is the source of truth of the application. Every application at the end of the day is a CRUD application. You create some data, you read some data, you update some data, and you delete some data. That's almost like 99.9% of applications are all fall into this CRUD application world. When you try and change the source of truth, which is the database, you are getting close, very close to the data in being able to alter the source of truth. That's why some companies have like database administrators, so DBAs. They keep the developers away from the database, and instead the developers have to work in the code to match the database design that's already integrated. And when you're working on an older application, you have to really take the database tables in consideration when building your code. Now, when you're building an application from scratch, you now still have to take the database, models that you're creating into big consideration. You want to make sure that you're following best practices from the very beginning because it's much harder to change. So like if you're going to be creating a user profile table and you already know you're going to be creating a user profile table, I wouldn't start with just like first name, last name, address, email, username, and password or whatever. I would add the other pieces of data that you need to potentially in the future and just set them as null so that you don't have to alter the database at all later on. Now, that's a simple migration, adding a new column and setting it null, but there's going to be a lot of other more intricate parts, like maybe it's creating different table structures where foreign keys and primary keys align better for joins and selects. And you do not want to have to alter the table if you don't have to. So you really want to make sure you take that into large consideration in the beginning. Now, number 4 is products are greater than leak code or coding problems. Real projects demonstrate real skill. Leak code is a filtering mechanism for data structures and algorithms for applying to roles. They are kind of two different things, and not all jobs require leak code skills, but all jobs require being able to build real projects. And that's really interesting when you really think about it, because there's so many new grads or boot camp grads or self-learn developers that are spending so much time on leak code when they should be spending time on building real projects, because real projects teach you multiple things. There's the how to build a real project. The more projects you build, the more things you're exposed to, the more things that like the dots start connecting. You'll start understanding that this framework could be swapped out with this framework. This language can be swapped out with this language. Maybe this database and this, endpoint request mechanism can be swapped out with this one. There's so much that you see and so many patterns that you're able to recognize when you create side products instead of focusing on leak code. And this is I'm actually really passionate about this. Like, leak code has its place. Don't get me wrong. There's FANG companies that require it. There's a lot of other jobs that require it. And I do think it's important to be able to get a role in understanding data structures and algorithms. I don't think it is as important as many people want you to think it is. And I think that is where my passion comes into it, because I've had to do leak code. I've had to do leak code. And if you build enough side projects and then you start applying for roles, I would say if you are a real developer and you know how to build real products, you can learn the leak code skills quite quick enough to be able to get a job. Maybe not, senior staff at Meta, but definitely enough to solve the frequent, easy, and medium problems that show up. It's really just a couple of different algorithms. A lot of people want to say dive into recursiveness and binary trees and all that kind of stuff. I don't think that's needed. I think you just need to learn the main algorithms and data structures, and then you'll be able to get a job with that. The biggest thing you have at your disposal is building real products. That's what people want to hire you for. So spend most of your time building real products. And with that, I'm going to tie number 5 into that. And that's not understanding how to get promoted or be able to get a role. And there's no single path to being able to get a job. There's people with CS degrees, there's people with boot camp degrees, there's people that are self-help and self-learned. All of those are very valid routes. Now, if you're having trouble getting a job, you can be a freelancer and try and pick up side projects on the side. You can work on open source contributions. Maybe there's some startup roles around. Maybe you can find an agency to work with. Those are all valid routes as well. I did it a little bit different. I became a business analyst for a company, and a business analyst is more or less the liaison between the business and the technology. So I would work with the business, find requirements for the software that they want to create, and, trying to figure out what I can build or talk to the tech team to be able to create the biggest business impact for the business, because that's who I'm communicating with. It was all one company, right? So it wasn't, we had a client. It was literally 2 rooms next to each other. One was a dev team, one was a business team, but I was the guy who talked between them. And then there was a dev team who had a list of priorities in what they were building. I was able to learn so much from that role because I was able to learn and understand what the business needed, what moved the needle, what did they actually care about. And then I was also able to talk with the dev team, right? And be able to communicate with the dev team about how to be a software developer. And I always wanted to be a software developer, but I didn't know how to be one. So I started my career in the business side, and then every single day for an entire year, it was literally 365 days straight. I coded every single night until I got my first software engineering paycheck. But I talked with the developers on the tech side, and they're able to teach and show me and guide me so much throughout my career. So I think that's an extremely valid way to get in. And that's why I'm sharing that story is you don't necessarily need to start applying for software dev jobs. If you're like borderline, like junior, apply for a tech job, get in, get real tech experience. You're going to be at least surrounded by words like maybe DevOps, servers, Git, remote repositories. You might not be the one in charge of that, but you're going to be surrounded by those technical terms. And then eventually the dots start connecting and then you can start going into the next phase, which is so important. And the next step is once you get in, how to actually get promoted and move to the next step. That's just as much about technical skills as relationship skills, but it's also about how you're training, mentoring others, and building the biggest impact that you possibly can for other people. And one thing that separates juniors from everybody else is juniors often focus on the task at hand, trying to solve the initial problem that they have on their plate, which is very, very important. And no, AI is not going to take that away. There's going to be superpowered juniors with AI. But when you become more mid, even more so senior in staff, your role shifts from just simply writing code to removing the entire team's roadblocks to increase velocity as high as possible. And what that really means is trying to solve the problems initially that might cause issues to everybody else downstream. So maybe that's setting up the infrastructure so the junior developers and mid developers can keep working on their tickets. How you can set up, maybe scale the cloud. Maybe you can set up the CI/CD pipeline with using GitHub Actions and maybe containerize the entire application to set it up on Docker so onboarding people don't have to spend as much time. It's all about removing those blockers, which blockers mean people get stuck in some way or some form. Removing those blockers and becoming the best engineer you possibly can be. If you're wanting to dive more into junior engineers and how you can, get over this systematic issue of, being a junior engineer, here's a video on the bad habits of being a junior engineer, and I will see you in the next.